But let's go to an old familiar trade partner, the Houston Texans. Where are they at? Houston Texans. T. Am I tripping? Okay, right here below Steelers. It's not in alphabetical order. Let's go to the Houston Texans, right? Now, Houston's a little bit interesting. Draft-wise, they don't have a ton of assets, but what they do have is young players. Now, chat, how would you feel about Myles Garrett being swapped for Will Anderson and a first next year and a fourth next year? Where's Will? They are really killing me by not having this in alphabetical order. How would y'all feel about that? Someone said the Raiders are ideal. Again, you got to think about it this way. Who's going to be motivated enough to give you that crazy package? Why in the world would the Raiders be motivated enough to give you a crazy package for Myles Garrett when they are decades away from winning? There you go. Will Anderson Jr., a first next year, and a fourth next year. Would you do it? Why would the Texans do this? They might think that upgrading their defensive line just a little bit might be enough. Now, maybe you say, hey, if the Texans trade for Myles Garrett, they want to keep Will Anderson. Okay, cool. They have Derek Stingley Jr. Would you do this? Again, the thought process here for the Texans, hey, we need to have a defensive line that can disrupt Kansas City, just like Philadelphia did. And the thought process for the Browns, we get a first next year, we get a fourth next year, and yes, we're losing our generational edge player, but we're picking up another corner to pair alongside with Denzel Ward, and we'll have the number 2 overall pick. We could draft Abdul Carter, and we can walk out still with a really good defense that can compete now, but also getting younger. You get an extra first for next year. If that becomes used for a quarterback, maybe you want to use 2 on quarterback this year, but you get an extra pick for next year. You get some extra selections, or maybe you can even turn Derek Stingley into another pick. Again, I want to make it clear. I am on team just don't trade him. It's very hard to get a trade that would make sense. Now, what if the Texans were super desperate and the Texans were willing to do something like bring on Deshaun Watson, right? They take that contract off our heads, give us the same offer. Does that become more appealing to you? Myles Garrett is such a valuable player that in order for the Browns to feel like, hey, this is worth moving, especially with the financial penalty we would incur, the deal has to be outrageous. I know people are like, oh, that's an outrageous deal. You're not going to trade Myles Garrett for anything reasonable this offseason. I hope you guys understand that. And if the Browns do trade Myles Garrett for anything reasonable this offseason, then everybody's going to get fired. That's a horrible idea. But if we go to the cap, if we're wondering, hey, does this even work in the salary cap if we do it? How would the Browns make this work? Let's look at this from the Browns' perspective first, right? If they trade, let's go to the calculator. If they trade Deshaun Watson, so trade pre-June 1st, they would eat 80 in dead cap, but it would be a $7 million penalty in salary cap space this year. So it'd be up from 30 to 37. And then you trade Myles, it would be a massive dead cap number this year, but a $16 million hit in your salary cap. How would you make up for this? Well, first you would restructure. Guys like Denzel Ward, that saves $9 million. Maybe you want to work a restructure out with Jack Conklin. Maybe you just want to outright cut Jack Conklin, right? You can restructure him, save $9 million on the cap this year. Or you can cut Jack Conklin post June 1st and save $14 million on the cap. Let's say you traded Myles Garrett, so you're rebuilding. Let's cut Jack Conklin, right? So that's $14 million right there. Joe Bitonio, you would either work a restructure out, save $4 million, or you would just outright cut him. which would save $8 million. Let's say you're rebuilding, he retires, you work a deal out, you save some money there. Boom. All right. Then you would look at the bottom end of your roster to make some of these savings, right? You can do a pretty easy move here, cut Jerome Ford. That saves $3 million. You could cut, who are some of these guys? DTR. You're going to keep Isaiah McGuire, Pierre Strong, Sam Kamara gone. You would keep these two. Ellerson Smith gone. Miles Harden gone. Troy Hairston gone. And then you would keep Jawan Briggs, Rex Sinahar gone. All right. So now we're down to 11 million. So if you want to get under the cap, you'll probably hit a restructure here. You could trade Greg Newsome. If you trade Greg Newsome, that frees up 13 million in space. Jets gone. You can restructure David Njoku and save nothing. You can trade David Njoku and lose 9, but some money over next year. Given that if you trade Deshaun Watson in his package, your 2026 cap jumps up significantly. It makes doing anything to save money in 2026 a pointless deal. But you could do something like that, right? Now let's switch over to the Texans side of things. Could they make this work financially? Again, this is all hypothetical. But could the Texans make this work financially, right? They bring on Myles Garrett. So let's add Myles Garrett to the team. That's who they want. Cool. They bring on Deshaun Watson. They don't really want Deshaun, but they're willing to eat Deshaun to lower the price a little bit on the trade or to make Cleveland want to do the trade. So they bring on Deshaun. Now they're $49 million over the cap. How would they afford it? They would hit a restructure. They would hit another restructure. They would hit another restructure. They would hit another restructure here with Nico Collins. Stephon Diggs is a free agent. Shaq Mason, they could hit another restructure here. And just like that, without losing anybody, they're under the cap. It would be a hilarious outcome. If the Houston Texans are like, all right, we'll take him back. Even though he has an open lawsuit against us. We'll take him back because we want Myles Garrett that bad. Myles gets to go to a contender. The Cleveland Browns get Derek Stingley, a first-round pick next year, and a fourth-round pick next year. So you get Myles for a player in a first and a fourth, which is under the price tag of what most people are saying. You just got to eat Deshaun's contract. And that would also solve the Browns' money concerns because that would make the Browns like $200 million under the cap for 2026. And it would pretty much erase any consequence of the Watson trade. So I have some trade scenarios that I've sourced from social media that I want to react to live in front of everybody. Surprise me with whichever one pops up and we'll talk about it. All right. This one comes from Snowstorm, who says Myles and a 2025 third to Detroit. So we're sending a third over and Myles Garrett for Detroit's 2025 and 2026 first, a 2026 fifth, and Hendon Hooker. I don't really know if I want Hendon Hooker in this deal. Like, I would rather just get another day 3 pick versus getting Hendon Hooker. I don't think I have very much use for Hendon Hooker here. But having to trade Myles in a third, so we're basically, trading up from 3 to 1. It's not a crazy enough deal, in my opinion, to justify going through everything you're going to have to go through that includes trading Myles Garrett. So it's not worth the cap ramifications. It's not worth the talent penalty that you would have. I don't think you can make up that talent penalty with 2 late first and a late fifth in Hendon Hooker. I don't think he even come close, especially if I'm sending out a 3rd round pick this year. I think it also cost me an opportunity because I think you can move that third or pair that third in a pick to get a better deal than what you're getting here. If I'm trading Myles Garrett, I want as little collateral damage on that trade as possible. So I don't want to include any other viable assets on a Myles Garrett trade. I want to include dead weight to a Myles Garrett trade, not a decent asset, including a third in a Myles Garrett trade. I think that feels reckless. So I don't think this would be the move for me, right? You would get what, pick 30 or something like that. And then you will get whatever the pick is next year, assuming that the Detroit Lions are relatively healthy. That's going to be another super late pick in Hendon Hooker. I don't know about that one. Also, like the motivation for the Lions, we'll see where that is. But I wouldn't be convinced that the motivation is like 100% where it needs to in order for that to happen. Let's get the next trade scenario. This one is from Matt, who said, my favorite so far was posted by a random Lions fan. Jameson Williams, Jack Campbell, and 2 first-round picks in exchange for Myles Garrett. Give me 1 second here. That's not awful. I don't know if it's good. Like, I'd be lying to you if I said I watched enough Detroit Lions football to know how much value to ascribe to somebody like Jack Campbell. But I do know Jameson Williams. He's been interesting. He's also been somebody who has demonstrated horrible decision making. But you would get another wide receiver, you would get a linebacker, and you pick up 2 first. Again, too late first. I don't know how valuable that compensation would be. It would be enough, like, you're not going to win if you make that trade, right? Like, that's not a win. Oh my God, Andrew Berry is the greatest trader of all time. He's awesome. Laser eye Andrew. That's not an amazing trade offer there. It's enough to where you could be like, I guess, right? Like if Jameson Williams turns into a top tier wide receiver and Jack Campbell turns into a pretty good linebacker, and then you hit on one of those 2 extra firsts you get with a decent player, you can feel like you didn't make one of the worst trades in franchise history with that one. Like it's possible to feel like you didn't make one of the worst trades. It wouldn't be a good trade. It wouldn't even be an equal trade, but it would be enough, right, to not feel like a complete failure. I don't think the Browns do it for that amount, though. Like, if you're asking me that question, would the Browns do it for this price? Probably not. Let's get the next one up. Let's see. You guys aren't making me want to trade Myles, man. And in chat, if you have any trade scenarios that you want to pop up, feel free to put them in the chat here. We'll make sure we get to those by the end of the show. All right, Michael says here, my favorite at the moment is to the Jaguars for pick 5 and 41 and their first and third and a 2027 second. I know you're not high on QB, but this gives the Browns options to draft Sanders or Ward and gives them an opportunity to get Carter, Graham, or Hunter at 5. I seriously doubt you can get Abdul Carter at 5. I'm similarly doubtful about Travis Hunter being available at 5. I think if you want one of those guys, you got to take him at 2. Mason Graham will be there at 5. Maybe Shador's there at 5. But yeah, I'm more skeptical about Carter or Hunter. Look, if you here's the thing about drafting a quarterback this year. If you didn't have to trade Myles in order to make it happen, getting Abdul Carter and then a quarterback makes whatever you do at quarterback a lot more easy to stomach. Because the reason you wouldn't want to take a quarterback here is because you don't want to miss out on the blue chip player. If you're still able to get the blue chip player, you're more likely to take a risk at quarterback. And that risk could be Shador Sanders or Cam Ward. The thing is that do you feel like you got to take that quarterback at 2, or do you think your quarterback's going to be there at 5? You know, that's the question you have to ask yourself. Again, if you made this trade, if Andrew Berry made this trade, I don't think he would immediately get fired. I think at that point you would have to draft the quarterback. Like if the centerpiece of your Myles trade is a 5th pick in the first round this year, you would have to draft the quarterback because whatever you do with Myles, the only way to turn it into some level of win is to turn it into a quarterback. And if you can't turn it into a quarterback, it's pretty much a waste of time. So you would have to turn one of those picks into a quarterback. Let's see, you pick up 41 in next year's one in third, and then in 2027 second. This would be okay. I don't think this would be terrible. If I had to trade Myles and this were an offer on the table and I've exhausted every resource to try to make this work for at least one more season, then I could see myself pulling the trigger on this. I wouldn't be excited about it though, but I could pull the trigger on it, you know? So that's not the worst trade I've ever seen. Now, here's the problem with it though. I see absolutely no reason for Jacksonville to do it. Like, what in the world tells Jacksonville if we get Myles Garrett, we're going to beat the Chiefs? Like, why would they have any confidence to feel that way? Like, I get that they have a quarterback in Trevor Lawrence that they believe in at the moment right now. But honestly, does anybody think that the Jaguars are one player away from winning a Super Bowl series? Yeah, let me ask the question. Like, y'all tell me. Because I 100% don't think that is even close to the case that Jacksonville would be a Myles Garrett trade. Like, enough to mortgage their future on. Like, they need more stuff. And I think they understand that. Another thing to consider, right? Any team that's going to trade for Myles Garrett, I think the teams with the first-year GMs are probably the least likely, because that is a giant, bold move to make in your first year. And usually these bold moves aren't made in your first year, right? The first year you spend adding guys in free agency and doing other stuff to kind of fit, and then you assess where you are after year one, and then you get a little bit more aggressive in year two. That's just naturally how the GM position works. You go back, you remember John Dorsey, right? He didn't really do much in 2018 other than like use the resources that he had, sign some free agents. 2019, he got super aggressive, traded for Odell Beckham. That second year he was in charge. Same thing with Andrew Berry, where it wasn't that first year he made an aggressive trade, but it was in the 2022 offseason where he decided to trade 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson. All this being said, yeah, if the Jags offered that, I would be cool with it. I do have a serious question on why the Jaguars would even want to offer that pick, because I just don't see what's motivating them to do it. Even if we think that they're being a bit unrealistic about where they're at, I find it hard to believe that that's where they're going to be at. But it's something to think about. Let's hit with the next trade scenario. All right, this one is from Pawn Shop Guitars, who says Detroit gets Myles, Cleveland gets Taylor Decker, David Montgomery, a first and a third. I'm hanging up the phone. Sir. Again, man, these firsts don't mean the same when it's Detroit's 28th. Like that. So basically, I'm trading Myles Garrett for a second and a third, and then 2 players whose contracts I can't afford because of the money that Myles Garrett is currently making to not play for the Cleveland Browns if I trade him. Again, got to consider that into your trade scenarios. It's not as clean as let's just throw a good player in there, right? The Browns have to be able to eat that contract. How can they eat it? Like, if Detroit wants that trade, they got to take Deshaun Watson. That's a trade that I'm only making if you take Deshaun Watson and do something to make that easier for me on the salary cap, because this is crazy. This is a crazy. No, I'm good on this. I don't know what chat's feeling on this one, but I am absolutely good on that. Again, can't afford these guys. Could not afford these guys. Let's get the next one up. trying to give me Decker. Like, you trying to dump a contract off on me? Like, it's nuts. You tried to dump a contract off on me to get Myles Garrett? Are you serious? I would block your number forever. Oh, my goodness. Jordan says, favorite, Myles to New England for the number 4 pick in 2026 first round or 2025 top 42nd round selection. Wait, did he say or? So I could get either New England's first and second this year or New England's first and first next year. Well, I'm definitely taking the 2026 first. Again, right? Like, if this is the best offer, it's at least what people are expecting. So you're not going to get fired on site for making a terrible trade. It's still not a good trade, right? You're only getting one extra. Well, you're getting 2 extra firsts. And you're getting 4. So maybe, if you want to turn that into something, you can turn that into something. Maybe you want to pull a Texans, right? Where you get your quarterback and your edge. You get Abdul Carter, you get Shador Sanders, right? Like, if you want to go ahead and do that, then you do that. If you feel that strongly about Shador, and a lot of this too, I think goes without saying. I'm looking at this from my perspective where I think Shador is a late first round graded QB that I don't want to spend a top 5 pick on. If the Browns look at Shador, which is very possible, as a quarterback that they would be more than happy to spend a top 5 pick on, then a trade like this becomes more attractive to them because it allows them to go BPA and it allows them to go quarterback, right? Because if you make this trade, you will know that you will at least get the 3rd best player on your board outside of who you draft, because 1 would be whoever Tennessee picks. You would have the 2nd pick, and then 3rd. So if you want to get Shador 2nd, Tennessee goes whoever they go. Let's say they go Travis Hunter. You take Shador 2nd, and then number 3 pick, they take whoever they take. You know that you can get Mason Graham at the very least, right? Or you could get possibly, Abdul Carter falls to you there. If Cam Ward and Shador go 1 and 2 overall, like a lot of people are projecting, and you're the Browns and you want Shador at 2, right? That means all you got to worry about is 3. So let's say Travis Hunter goes 3, you get Abdul Carter. Let's say Abdul Carter goes 3, you get Travis Hunter. So this would be a lot more easy to stomach if you believe that there is a quarterback for you to take in the top 5. My personal opinion, again, it's just my opinion. Doesn't mean it's right. It just means I'm being honest about how I feel about it. My personal opinion is that there isn't a quarterback that I would like to spend a top 5 pick on, and I don't think a quarterback worth not being in the next 2 draft classes for. So I don't think I would be the biggest fan of this. But if internally the Browns are sold on Shador, and if that's the guy they want to go for, I cannot blame them for making this trade. Because you would be able to get you would be able to get your quarterback, you'd be able to get an extra first, and you could start from there, and that would be a very good starting point for a rebuild around a quarterback if you believe in one of these quarterbacks in the 2025 draft. So that's another thing to consider, right? On top of the money. How do you feel about the quarterback class? If you are like me and you don't love this quarterback class, any trade with the 2025 pick doesn't feel that appealing to you. But if you aren't like me, which is fair and reasonable to come to, and you like one of these quarterbacks enough to take them early, then all of a sudden, getting an extra top 10 pick or extra top 5 pick becomes more attractive. That's also not so expensive that I would think the Patriots would feel like it's unreasonable to do. I think it would be ambitious for the Patriots to do, but it's not so expensive that I'm like, oh, they just traded away their future like that Jaguars offer was. So again, if you think that quarterback is something that you want to do in this year's draft, that is an offer that you would probably want to take. If it came down to it, right? If Myles was completely unreceptive to any conversations, you get to draft day, he's still not receptive. All right, let's make the move, right? Like if you feel like that strongly about quarterback, I do not, so I don't love it. But maybe you like quarterback in this year's draft, and you would like it. That's a fair enough point to get to. Let's get to the next trade scenario. Oh, this one has a fancy graphic on it. It's from Bleacher Report. Okay, this is the professionals made this one. Let's hope it's not trash. The Patriots will get Myles Garrett. The Browns will get number 4, a 2025 third, another 2025 third, a 2025 fifth. And does that say Joe Milton? Again, similar to the trade scenario we just talked about, except for you don't pick up an extra first. You'll get a bunch of third round picks. I would rather get a future pick, right? If I get 4 in 2025, I don't want a million selections in 2025. Because another thing to consider, and again, I don't think enough people are considering this, you're going to have some serious cap ramifications if you trade Myles Garrett this offseason that are going to impact you in the 2025 cap year. So you wouldn't want to add 2 extra thirds in a fifth plus another player this year. You would want to spread out whatever you bring in for Myles Garrett, preferably over 3 years, but definitely over 2 years. So instead of getting a third this year or 2 thirds this year, I would rather get their 2026 first. Instead of getting their fifth this year, I would rather get a third in 2027. So I would want to spread it out. I don't even like you can add Joe Milton to the deal. That's not like considerable enough money for me to care either way. You could just cut a back end player and bring in Joe Milton. It's not a big deal. But yeah, for the extra draft picks, I do care. And I want that spread out, and I want a first in 2026, not a couple of thirds in 2025. So I would turn that offer down, me personally. I want the extra first next year because I think the quarterback class is going to be better in 2026. That's also another thing that you got to think about too, right? Where do you think the quarterback's going to come? The Browns have to take a swing at quarterback in one of these 2 years. Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? If it's next year, you want that extra first. If it's this year, you really value that extra fourth. It would be reasonable, right? Those last 2 offers would be reasonable. Let's see if we could get an unreasonable offer here. We've seen a couple of offers that I would categorize as reasonable. Let's get another one up. Look, man, there's nothing fun about trading Myles Garrett. I would like to throw that in here. This is not fun. Nobody's having fun here. But there are things to talk about. All right. Ernie, the Cowboys fan, suggested that the Browns would trade Myles Garrett. Wait, the number 2 overall and Myles Garrett? Did they just say that? Did they say the Browns? Oh, this is why I don't be on Twitter, man. This is why I don't be on Twitter. So the Browns would trade number 2 overall in Myles Garrett to get Micah Parsons and Trey Lance. Cowboys will use the 2nd overall pick to draft Travis Hunter. So no, absolutely throw this. I will block you and report you for harassment. That is crazy. That is an insanely bad trade. Are you serious? Stop using it. Stop playing on my phone. I would disconnect my phone for the rest of the day if I heard this bullshit come through my phone. Like, what? What? Also, I mean, my God, imagine the cap ramifications. Let's run through it real quick. Can you show my screen again? Let's see what that would cost the Browns when it comes to cap space. All right, so you would trade Myles. They want the 2nd overall pick, so this has to be pre-June 1st, right? So we're at minus $46 million in cap space. Let's see what this does. Micah Parsons. You would add him. Oh, he's only under contract for one more year, and you have to give him an extension? So we're what, $69 million in the hole? Are you serious, dog? Wait, no. He said Trey Lance too. How much I gotta pay Trey? Because ain't Trey about to be a free agency? Trey's a free agent. How are you trading Trey Lance? This trade makes no sense. No, this trade makes no sense. Absolutely not. We would be $70 million in the hole with a player who could hit free agency next offseason. What would be the point? What would be the point? Nah, man. Get out of here with this. Can we pull up the next one? Oh, my goodness. Wow. We've seen some crazy scenarios today. That was the worst one I think we're going to see all day. I can't imagine it gets worse. All right. It gets worse. It gets worse. It gets so much worse. Who made this graphic, y'all? Let me try to see if I can figure that out. Who proposed this trade? What outlet proposed this trade? AFC North Access in Brown Central. I don't know much about those two brands. I've never heard of them before. So forgive me if I'm about to cross a line here, but that might be the worst trade offer I've seen today. We would get Deebo Samuel. Okay. It's not a first. We would get Deebo Samuel. No, this still sucks, man. This still sucks. This is an awful trade. We have to give up a fourth too, dog. So basically I'm doing a pick swap and then swapping. So all I'm getting is a 6. I'm getting madder the more I look at this trade offer. So let me try to, because I'm just reacting to it. So the idea here is that we swap Myles Garrett and Deebo Samuel. We do a pick swap where I move up, 3 spots in the 4th to 99 in the 3rd. So we do a pick swap, and then I get a 6 for my troubles. A 6th-round pick to compensate for adding on a bunch of salary cap debt. Now, also, let's go back to the computer so we could look up how much this would cost the Browns, like we did with Micah Parsons. And at least it ain't going to get you to $70 million, right? Because you trade for Deebo, his base salary is not that expensive. And San Francisco wouldn't have much to deal with. You would have to give Deebo a new contract. And why would the Browns trade for a 29-year-old wide receiver? If they're going to have to rebuild, who is not seen as good as his position as Myles Garrett is at his? You would have to give me a serious answer on that. But yeah, I think this is a bad idea too. I think this is an awful idea. I am very disappointed with the two publications that have gone far enough to offer up a graphic for one of these trades and what they have suggested. What? That's awful, man. Does anybody in chat like that trade? Did anybody in chat like that trade? Let me check. I don't think anybody in chat liked that trade. What if Trevor Lawrence was thrown into the deal for Jacksonville? Why would the Jacksonville Jaguars throw Trevor Lawrence in that deal if that whole thing is to get Trevor Lawrence closer to a championship? All right, we got some comments here. Let's put the comments on screen to react to them. And again, if you have your own trade proposals or reactions to these trades, feel free to comment them in the live chat. That way we can react to it live here on Quincy Carrier Live. Jeffrey Champion says, do you think that maybe Aaron Rodgers is a big enough name at this point in time to make Myles Garrett stay? Because not too long ago, look what we did with Joe Flacco. Maybe. I think Aaron Rodgers is a big name, right? The same way that Russ was a big name, the same way if you bring in Kirk Cousins is a big name. But the issue is that, yes, these guys are big names, but the value of the brand of Kirk Cousins and the value of the brand of Russell Wilson or the value of the brand of Aaron Rodgers has diminished significantly because they're not just old, but have played not up to their standard for consecutive years, right? Aaron Rodgers' last 2 full seasons haven't been great. They've been not terrible, but they haven't been great. Kirk Cousins, his last full season wasn't amazing. And who was he? Russell Wilson. He's coming off a good season, but he's been cooked for a while. He did a lot of damage to his name in Denver. So I don't think any of those names move the needles because of those reasons. The only name I can see possibly moving the needle is Matt Stafford. Because Matt Stafford, while he's older than Kirk Cousins, is a player that people still think is still as good as he's ever been. So I think Matt Stafford might, let Myles at least get to a place where he's like, I'll give this a try this year and see how far we go. I can see Myles doing that. With like somebody like him, Aaron Rodgers, it would be a toss up if he got to that point, to be honest with you. Like, I wouldn't be 100% sure if he would do that for Aaron Rodgers. Because again, the damage to Aaron Rodgers' brand over the last 3 years has been enormous. Thank you for the question. Can we get another one up on screen? W. Skeezer says post June 1st trade. Okay. Myles, a 2026 fourth, and a 2027 second for the Vikings. J.J. McCarthy, a 2026 first, and a 2026 third. If you take that 2027 second out the Browns deal here, I'm more likely to do it. Well, you're getting 3 firsts and JJ. So basically, they don't trade you a first. Their first this year is J.J. McCarthy that they're trading you. 2026 first and 2027 first. I'd be more likely to do this. I wasn't super high on J.J. McCarthy when he came out, but if the Browns were high on him, then yeah, it makes sense. This trade makes sense. I would try like hell to not include that 2027 second because it's just I don't want stuff popping up 3 years later. So I would try to see if I could turn that into just giving them Myles in a 2026 fourth, and then they could give me all of that. Hell, I could even say, hey, you just got to give me the first in 2026 and the first in 2027. You could take out that third. I'll take out that second, and we could just make that deal from there. I take one pick out, you take one pick out. We be nice and smooth because that third in 2026 has a similar value to that second in 2027 right now. So, let's just do that. So I would take out that second in 2027 and maybe take out that 2026 third from Minnesota. But if Minnesota offers you this, again, it's heavily dependent on 2 things. 1, how do you feel about J.J. McCarthy as a prospect? And 2, how do you feel about Shedeur Sanders as a prospect? If you feel stronger about JJ than you do about Shedeur Cam, then you make this trade easily. If you feel similar or worse about JJ than you do about Shedeur or Cam, then you don't make this trade. And if you feel equally as bad about all of these guys, JJ and Shedeur and Cam, than you do about comparing them to the future draft classes, then you just punt this can down the road and you don't take this trade. So that would be intriguing, right? I think Houston and Minnesota are my dark horse candidates for teams that could make a crazy move for Myles Garrett that we're not anticipating right now, right? I think those 2 teams might make more sense. It might feel like they're in a position that people don't think that they're in to make a move like that. And they have assets that could get them that, right? Which is unique to almost every other contender, right? Houston can give you a Derek Stingley who's expendable. or Will Anderson, who wouldn't be expendable but would be worth swapping with Myles Garrett to get a win now scenario. Minnesota similarly can, make a JJ McCarthy expendable in pursuit of just keeping Sam Darnold. So there are a lot of things to think. Do we got any more comments to put on screen here? Question Q, is Abdul Carter the next Myles Garrett? No. I also think we should make this point clear. If the Browns have to trade Myles Garrett and they draft Abdul Carter, understand that Abdul Carter will never be as good as Myles Garrett. And you're hearing this from what people claim to be Abdul Carter's number one supporter for being drafted to the Browns, right? I love Abdul Carter. He will never be as good as Myles Garrett. Like, just that Myles Garrett is once in a generation. Abdul Carter is a really great prospect, like a blue chip prospect. Myles Garrett is like, those only come around once a decade. He's generational. Abdul Carter has the potential to have a really great career, potentially a Hall of Fame career. Myles Garrett is already a Hall of Famer. Like, even if they both made the Hall of Fame, which is projecting a lot for Abdul, but even if they both made the Hall of Fame, we got to be honest, Myles Garrett is a different level of Hall of Famer than most guys who enter the Hall of Fame.